construction plan and an assessment plan. The plan was approved by DWR on June 7th, 2019. On November 19th, 2019, DWR staff conducted a site inspection to reassess overall site conditions. It was determined that Rock Fork Branch, Stream B, and Stream C and the riparian buffers had not been restored. On December 13th, 2019, after multiple failed attempts to communicate with H&M Logging regarding the stream and riparian buffer restoration, the Raleigh Regional Office forwarded a case package to DWR Central Office for its consideration of assessment of civil penalties for the violations. On February 10th, 2020, a civil penalty assessment in the amount of $45,053.20, including investigative costs, was assessed against Claude Fogelman and others and H&M Logging for the previously cited violations. The assessment document was delivered to H&M Logging via certified mail on February 14th, 2020. On May 12th, 2020, DWR received a request for remissions from H&M Logging. The request included a justification for remission request and a waiver of right to an administrative hearing and stipulation of facts. DWR reviewed the information submitted by H&M Logging Incorporated and considered a partial remission of 20% of the $45,053.20 of the civil penalty assessment. The revised civil penalty assessment amount is $36,253.20, which includes the investigative costs. DWR's remission decision was sent to H&M Logging Incorporated, which has requested an appearance before the committee today. The division recommends that no further remissions be granted in this matter and that the revised civil penalty assessment of $36,253.20 be upheld. In closing, the stream standard and riparian buffer violations caused by the logging activities of H&M Logging to Rock Fork Branch, Stream B, and Stream C were very severe. I've never seen stream and buffer violations of this severity, and is not typical of what I see conducting site investigations. I would be glad to answer any questions that the committee may have and request the opportunity to respond to points that may be raised by H&M Logging during its presentation. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, may I have a question?
Please.
I don't actually see the remission request itself,
Okay.
or the justification, or the analysis done by staff. I may be missing it.
It should be on page 81.
81.
Yes.
Okay. And part of this confusion is because the new system sort of pulls things up differently.
Yeah. So page 81 includes the H&M remission request.
And is that under attachment A, B, or C?
I think it's the other one, it's a fourth attachment.
If you click on just the number.
Now there it is. Yeah, sorry. I thought I'd seen it before, but when I looked at the attachments, I didn't see it. Okay. That's all. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Part of the trying to get back to where you were at before on these things. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions from committee members? Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I had a couple, if I may. Your early quick reference to a red algal bloom, is that connected?
No, it was not.
Okay.
We received a complaint from the Water Sciences Lab. They had received a red algal bloom complaint, and it was on basically a parcel that was right next to this one.
That's fine. It's not material to this case.
No.
All right, thank you.
We did not see a red algal bloom.
And has any actual site restoration been performed by the applicant here then?
Yes, there has been restoration performed, and I do have notes regarding that if you would like me to speak of that now, or if you would like to hear Mr. Kenneth Hodges.
No, go ahead and do that now.
Yeah.
Go ahead, do now. Okay.
We do want to hear it. The extent, is it approved? Is
Yep.
it satisfactory? Yes, thanks.
Sure. Yeah, so I'll continue the timeline. On March 12th, 2020, the Raleigh Regional Office met on site with Mr. Hodges, and this is on Glen Fogelman Road, to outline restoration expectations and discuss the details of work plan to achieve compliance at the site, as well as anticipated timelines for achieving proposed goals. On April 30th, 2020, Mr. Hodges provided a restoration report outlining the work completed, which was the brush was removed, pulled back from the stream banks, the creeks were restructured in severely damaged areas, 2 creek crossings were repaired and stabilized, stabilization in areas where erosion potential was high, they completed that work. They marked the naturally regenerated trees with flagging. They basically gave us a receipt showing that 24,500 hardwood plants were planted in the buffers. And they showed us an invoice dated April 8th, 2020, that a 750 tree per acre was planted, 3,450 linear feet along the creeks. And then in June 30th, 2020, Raleigh Regional staff conducted a site visit to basically to get an update on the status of the site. We observed flagging denoting the 50-foot buffer, new bare root plantings, and natural revegetation. At the time, it was in June, and so the stream had very little flow. It was dry in places, so it was difficult to determine the stream restoration because it was basically dry. And at that time, temporary crossings were still in place. On November 4th, 2020, Raleigh Regional staff conducted a site visit to assess the stream and buffer restoration efforts. Mr. Hodges was present for the site visit. We observed grasses, willows, goldenrod. The stream was flowing at the time, and at that time, the stream restoration was deemed to be complete at the site visit. And then at that time is also when we asked Mr. Hodges to provide us basically a monitoring report. And he provided a monitoring report on November 23rd, 2020. We received the first and only restoration monitoring report conducted by Youngblood, Tyler and Associates. The plan consisted of 7 photo stations, each with a 20-foot radius, and they detailed the specific vegetation within the photo station. So basically, H&M conducted the stream restoration and the riparian buffer plantings. That's it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Welcome.
Any other questions? One question real quick. I was just letting other committee members speak. On the original inspection, when you say severity of, is that the severity? Explain how severe it can get
Sure.
when you see the
So
creek beds or the sides and all that. Just how severe can it get?
So basically, the logger took the mechanized equipment into the stream beds. So so basically when I was there, it was very hard to just discern exactly where the stream channel was. And when we do site visits, we always carry a metal auger with us. And so basically, in order to find the stream channel with the rutting from the equipment and the downed trees, I had to use my metal auger to basically feel for the stream bed substrate. And so I would basically walk upstream from Glen Fogelman Road and try to locate the stream within the ruts and the downed trees. So when I say it was severe, I have never encountered a impact where you couldn't even determine where the stream had been.
Okay, question then on the, under the soil was in the stumps.
Yes.
Were they extracted stumps? Were they pulled out of the ground, which would,
Yeah, the stumps were still there.
so all this was top growth from trees,
Yes.
bushes, whatever the vegetation is. This was the removal of that, but not the stumps.
Correct. That's correct. You could still, when you walked on the land, you could still see the stumps there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is there a permitting piece of how low you can cut trees and leave a stump for a logger goes in that knows that if they may be in any area Is it part of the permitting process that they leave so much of the stump out of the ground?
So the rules in a buffer basin for basically for forestry is they have to leave a certain amount of riparian buffer. They can't go in and cut the entire riparian buffer, nor can they impact the stream. As far as what height they would cut the trees and the stumps, I'm not sure of that answer, sir.
Okay. So you're saying that the riparian buffer, they went in to the center and moved out, which they are not
They
permitted to do so,
correct. They removed the entire riparian buffer.
which is how many feet from the center of the stream?
So it's basically top of bank, 50 feet outward.
50, okay,
So they didn't leave any trees.
okay, okay. There was no silt fencing or anything? No, okay, okay, thank you. Any questions? Yes.
So I'm trying to imagine in my mind what happened on the site. So the primary goal, the logger was just taking out trees for logs. Stumps were left behind.
Yes.
Obviously, there's not stumps in the middle of a creek, but the equipment waxed out the middle of the creek. On the restoration plan, I assume the stumps were still left there, correct? And then they just put plantings around that.
Yes.
Okay, that's how I wanted to make sure. I wasn't sure how much of that stream. There was no shaping of banks or any of that stuff. It was just getting vegetation back
They
in
did,
and letting.
they did, he did. And that was the site visit that we conducted on November 4th to basically look at the work that he had done to restore the stream banks. And if you'll notice on the pictures provided, you may even notice, you'll see the stumps, you'll see them on the edge, and then you'll see water. That is indicative of basically that was the top of bank where the stream had been. And then you can kind of discern where the top of bank was.
Right, and this NOV was at the logger and not the landowner. I assume that they were contracted to go in, pull off logs. The property is owned by someone else.
Correct.
Okay,
That's correct.
that's all.
Thank you, Commissioner Harris. Any other questions? Okay. Yes, Commissioner Deerhake.
I don't know whether this is a question for the state or for the party seeking remission, but it wasn't clear to me if there was a forester involved at some point who cruised it and marked where they should and should not go.
My understanding was no, a forester was not involved until I notified them. I notified the water quality forester, Nancy Blackwood, and informed her of the violations on the site. And at that point, Nancy made the site visit. So my understanding was no, a water quality forester was not involved prior to me informing them.
You say water quality forester, you mean a state employee? Or you just, or you,
She is with the forestry service.
right.
Yes.
But landowners can also have their own forester. And if they're a licensed forester, it seems like they would be responsible for
I'm
marking where the buffer zones are.
right. I'm not aware of that.
Thank you, Commissioner Deerhake. Any others? Questions? Thank you.
Thanks.
This time, we'll hear now from the requesting party. And please, if you would, come up and present your this request for remissions. And if you would, hold on 1 second. Before we get started with your name and where you're from and who you represent, I'd like to ask Mr. Reynolds, he has something to say real quick.
Sorry to interrupt, sir. Just for the members of the committee, as I noted before, this is a quasi judicial proceeding. And this penalty involves a corporation organized under the state of North Carolina. Our North Carolina State Bar, who regulates the practice of law, has indicated that the appearance on behalf of another person in a quasi judicial proceeding without being a licensed attorney is the unauthorized practice of law. Over the years, our Supreme Court has taken a slightly different approach. And previously, this commission and the two committees have required a vote before allowing someone to speak. But in recent years, the practice has been that the committee, as long as there is no objection, can hear from someone who is not a licensed attorney, as long as they speak to the facts and not arguing the law. You've always, in the last several years that I've been with you, you've allowed them that courtesy without incident unless someone moves to prohibit that from being made. The reason I mention this, and it's usually been more, until recently, it's been more impactful for Remissions Committee 2, which I normally sit with, because there's a number of attorneys there. We have one with us now. So the reason I mention it specifically is because it is not, by hearing an individual who's not a licensed attorney make a presentation on a quasi-judicial matter, the bar has said it is not the assistance in the unauthorized practice of law. So, Commissioner Bailey, you're safe?
Yes.
You're good to go. So, Mr. Chair, I would suggest that unless someone says otherwise, you can proceed as you, or has an objection, you can feel free to proceed as you wish.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. That was a good point, and the purpose of me asking was that the requesting party represented by an attorney, and other is if the consensus of the committee that we proceed. Okay, thank you. Please.
Good evening.
And speak, I'm sorry, if you speak louder, so we.
Everyone, my name is Kenneth Hodges, and I'm with H&M Logging, and I'm here to get remission of my fine.
Good afternoon,
To
sir.
ask for remissions of my fines. At the time when we cut the track of wood on the Glen Formagen Road, it was dry weather, and my forester, I had a forester by the name of Trey Reese at that time, and he told my guys to go on and cut the trees. There was no buffers on the track because it was dry weather stream, but he didn't check into it. And then it rained about 2 weeks after we was there. And after he told my guys that, that's when they kind of made the mess after it rained. I was unaware of that because he told them it was okay to cut the trees out the buffer. In the state of Virginia, and I understand this is North Carolina, the buffers are volunteer cut. You can cut everything on it if you want to. It's volunteer, but we leave trees on it because it's volunteer now. So at that time, he told my guys to cut all the trees, and that's what they done. So it did make it messy in there, as Stephanie spoke up about it. They had pictures and everything of it. And the track was just about completed when I found out about what was going on. So when I went out there, I immediately started to get in touch with DEQ. I talked to her, Stephanie, and I wanted to know what I had to do to get it straight. And I hired an engineer, a consultant engineer, and she gave me all the paperwork that I needed, what we need to do to restore the creek. So of course, the weather was nasty. That was in 2021, 20. We got a lot of rain, and it was you just couldn't really fix it at that time. So that's why it took us a lot of time to get it fixed. But I did restore it, and I was there about 2 weeks ago, and everything looks good on the stream. So I'm just here to just ask you all just to give me remissions because, I completed everything and it was just a mistake. I'm a logger. Loggers don't have the same rules that contractors have as far as when we cut a tract of timber. We don't have to call anyone. We can cut the tract of timber. I actually bought the tract of timber from another gentleman, which is what we call a timber broker, and he did not mark any lines. And that's what happened. It was an honest mistake on my part, my employees, but we did not do it intentionally.
I have one quick comment on Commissioner Deerhake had mentioned process of permitting. I think, Miriam, what I understood is what he might have just alluded to is permitting who gets the permit, and if he's working with a broker, then does the is it the broker's responsibility to look at a map or does it, and being out of state, coming into state?
There's no permit that I'm talking about. I'm just talking about if a landowner has a forester on retainer to advise them, oftentimes that forester will be the one who marks it so that they know not to go into the buffer zone. That's just my experience.
Okay. Any questions? Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. How much did it cost to do the restoration?
First of all, I paid my engineer $46,000, and it cost I don't have all my figures with me, and maybe I should.
An estimate's fine.
Roughly 125,000.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Harris.
Now that you know what you know, how would you do things differently? Because you said a minute ago it was dry. State of North Carolina has intermittent streams that are all regulated with buffers. So being dry isn't an excuse to me, I'll be honest. So, I mean, we've got to have some assurance that this isn't going to happen. And we only knew about this because of another issue. So, state of North Carolina does have a forestry association. They have forestry BMPs. Department of Agriculture regulates that. Did you get any statements from Trey Reese? You said he was your forester. I went and tried to look him up. I don't see him
Well, he was my private forester. He actually worked for me. He didn't work for the state.
Right, but is he registered? I mean, that forestry association, they have numbers and that kind of thing, or is he just someone that?
Well, we call foresters, if you hire someone to buy timber for you and look at your tracks, we call them foresters. But he's not really a registered forester for the state or anyone, he's not that. He was just my private forester. But I don't think he was not registered.
Right, but he was,
forester.
but he was the one you said a minute ago,
Yes, ma'am.
told you to go in and take the trees.
Yes, ma'am. Well, he said that the buffer was not required on that track. Now, I don't know where he got that from, but he said there was no buffers required. At that time, it was dry, and the reason why I said that, because there was no water running in the stream at that
Right.
time. It was like we moved in like August, and it was just really, really dry. He said you didn't have to leave any buffers on the creek at that time.
Yeah, and doesn't quite work that way, so these are lessons learned, I guess.
And then after I got in trouble with this, he actually quit. So then he left me holding off the bag. And I was trying to get in touch with my engineer to have her to come with me today. And she moved with another company. So I've been emailing her ever since I got the letter from you all, and I can't get in touch with her.
It's been a painful.
Just showed up to just to tell you all this is it. This is
Gotcha.
what I got.
Thank you.
Any others? Questions?
But for the
Commissioner
state,
Terry.
thank you. For the state again, do they believe that it's adequately restored now or not?
If we,
You asking me?
no, well, next.
Do I believe that it's adequately restored? As far as the riparian buffers or as far as the stream restoration?
You tell me anything you want to say about that question.
I believe that the stream restoration was completed, and I gave Mr. Hodges verbal confirmation when we were out on the site. As far as the buffer restoration, they had basically, Miss Alexis Jones did the photo station ID, and they did the 7. Basically, they went in and did the certain amount of 20 feet area where they looked at the plantings, and the plantings that Mr. Hodges stated that he planted weren't in any of those photo stations. At this point, I conducted a site inspection out there, on September of last year, 2021, to see how it looked. And the stream was dry. And basically what I saw, and I'm not a botanist, so what I saw was, I was happy with the stream restoration. The buffer restoration, I could say could have been better, yes.
All right, I have one more question while
Yes,
she's
ma'am.
up. And what's the maximum penalty that would have been allowed? I saw in here $25,000 per day, but
It would be 25,000 per day per violation.
and there were multiple
There were
violations.
multiple violations.
Okay.
Do you ask Jeff to come up and give some further explanation, if you would, on that? Since it was your recommendation on these dollars, please. Thank you.
F&D open, but typically we could do daily penalties, but we don't do the penalty per day. We do sort of a snapshot, depending on the situation, the particular situation. We don't necessarily do daily penalties for every day, but just the days that it's observed, and then maybe there's a break before we go back and see if anything's improved. And that's what we did in this case instead of dailies.
And then here I have like 45,000 was the total amount due, but then you've reduced it from that, right?
We already had remission at the staff level,
Yeah.
and then that was not adequate. He
Yeah.
deemed that as
Mhm.
not adequate and took this here.
So the amount we're considering now is,
Yeah, you're actually
30.
considering the full amount, my understanding, and you can restore. Philip, you can comment here, I guess, be better.
Yeah, I got you covered. I got you covered, Mr. Mark. Mr. Chair, if I may.
Please.
So and I can, if it's the committee's pleasure at some point that's appropriate, I'm happy to run through the factors that you're allowed, or that you must consider when remitting it, and the
Let's do that.
circumstances when you're allowed to remit further. But in every case, the first place you start is with the staff's recommendation. If you find that they have applied, if they're recommending a reduction and you find that they have not adequately supported that recommendation, yes, you can in fact do the full penalty. But generally speaking, because you are required to begin with the staff's recommendation, if the staff has recommended a reduction, that's generally your starting point, or at least that has been anecdotally where you have started. Because what your actual requirement is that you must find reasons to remit the penalty. Can increase it, cannot increase it. You can go against staff's recommendation, but you have to find that there are reasons to remit the penalty or reduce it. Otherwise, it stays as it is. If you find if you find no grounds, excuse me, thinking about my cup of coffee, that's why I kept saying grinds. You found no grounds to reduce the penalty. In other words, we're going to start with what the staff has recommended. You review their recommendation, and you can either stick with that. You can find that they did not adequately support that recommendation and go back up to the original, or you can find that there are further grounds to reduce it. There is only a very limited opportunity, though, for you to reduce it fully, if I may. And that is when the statute says that this committee may remit the entire amount of the penalty only when the violator has not been assessed civil penalties for previous violations, and when the payment of the civil penalty will prevent payment of the remaining necessary remedial actions. Otherwise, there's no limit on the actual dollar figure or percentage that you can reduce it. It's just that you have to consider 5 factors, which are whether one or more of the civil penalty assessment factors in subsection B, which I can go over briefly later, of the section were wrongly applied to the detriment of the petitioner. So you have both wrongly applied and that it resulted in a detriment. Whether the violator promptly abated continuing environmental damage resulting from the violation, whether the violation was inadvertent or a result of an accident, and inadvertence has not necessarily been defined to include ignorance. You're still required to know what laws apply. Whether the violator had been assessed civil penalties for any previous violations And number 5 is whether whether payment of the civil penalty will prevent payment for the remaining necessary remedial actions. Mr. Chair, I'll leave it up to you if you want me to go over the 8 factors that must be considered when the penalty is being assessed. I can do that sort of
No,
briefly.
go ahead and do that, please.
Okay. So number 1 is the degree and extent of harm to the natural resources of the state, to the public health, or to the private property resulting from the violation, the duration and gravity of the violation, the effect on ground or surface water quantity or quality or on air quality, the cost of rectifying the damage, the amount of money saved by noncompliance, whether the violation was committed willfully or intentionally, and that's willfully or intentionally different being inadvertence, obviously. The prior record of the violator in complying or failing to comply with programs over which the EMC has regulatory authority, and the cost to the state of the enforcement proceedings. So those 8 factors that I just read are the 8 that the secretary or his or her designee must consider when assessing the penalty. And then you have your 5, which include those 8. You get the lucky 13 really when considering whether to remit the penalty. So I'm glad to sort of take that in smaller bites of questions, Mr. Chair, if anyone has them, but that's the general overview of it.
Yes.
I think my last question for the staff is, I didn't hear any mention of previous penalties for H&M logging. Is that correct? Okay, so this is a first time. Okay.
And I want to ask the requesting party, the dollar amount, again, that you have spent. I didn't see it in the report, and I'm trying to stay with exactly what's in this report. And but you mentioned 100. Did you say $125,000? Okay. And you hired an engineer. Is that in the report that you hired? Would you come up just a second? Let me ask you a couple of questions, please. Thank you. And again, I apologize, just have to scroll through his finance reports. Is it in the report that you have hired and paid that engineer? That's.
Not sure that the amount that was spent, Mr. Chair, was included in it, although that's certainly, I think, within the bounds of the record to find out how much, because that is actually a specific thing that you're going to have to consider.
Correct.
The recommendation starts on page around 90, and it talks about the recommendation itself talks about some of the things that were done, or summarize some things that were done. And they also consider each of those factors
Right.
as well.
So what was your price to the engineer?
It was roughly 46,000.
46,000. And then you said you had some other.
The trees, I didn't bring the paperwork, but I have all that. I think my wife emailed it off to Stephanie, price of the trees, and then I did a lot of the work with my guys, so I didn't put anything down for the time. I don't have a receipt for the time that it took us to do the repairing, but we stayed there several weeks doing work in there. And we bought a lot of straw and some logs and different things to repair the creek.
Okay.
So, go ahead.
No, we're good. Okay. Thank you. Okay. I don't have any other questions. Committee members, Commissioner Harris.
Can you tell me roughly what the price of those trees were out of the impacted sections
The price of the trees that we
that you
taken out,
logged? Mhm.
well, it wasn't a lot, probably $4,000. Well, let's say 7,000, probably 7,000.
Commissioner Bailey. Commissioner Modest.
I was looking through the record, and so I'm asking questions from that, but it says in there that you've been in this industry for a certain number of years. And could you just, since it's in the record, would you just talk to us a little bit about what you do with your company and how long you've been in business and what places in North Carolina do you operate?
I've been in business for 37 years. I cut timber in North Carolina many years. I don't cut a lot of tracts of timber in North Carolina. This is the first time to say that ever happened to me. But I'm one of the largest loggers in Virginia, production wise, employee wise. We cut in Virginia and North Carolina. I'm trying to think at this moment, do I have a tract in North Carolina I'm cutting? I have one tract we're cutting there in North Carolina. It's over in Henderson, North Carolina. But what else would you like to know?
I think it sounds like your presence is mostly in Virginia and
More
not,
in Virginia, but we do a lot. I started back in Carolina. I used to cut a lot in Carolina back in 2010, and we kind of stopped cutting in Carolina. And then we bought a few tracts from this timber broker, and we cut those. But I don't cut as much in Carolina as I do in Virginia.
okay, thank you.
But I would promise you all that I will never have that to happen to me again on my logging job. It has been a nightmare to me. And it was the first time it ever has happened. And I've cut thousands of acres of tracts of timber.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Mons.
I just had a quick question for the staff. Could you remind me what your suggested remittance was? Was it down to 38? 36?
So basically, we did a remissions of 20%, which is $36,253.20.
Okay. I'm ready to make a motion if other.
Please.
Okay. And I appreciate you being here, and I feel for you. It's a costly mistake. I appreciate your restoration and sentiment that this won't happen again. Since the staff has recommended a significant remittance, I'm inclined to stick with what the staff recommended to the 36 and change figure. So I would move to go with that.
Motion's on the floor that we stay with the staff and the total of $36,253.20. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Harris. Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor, I'm sorry, go
Yeah,
ahead.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, waiting to see if someone else wished to speak.
Commissioner McAdams.
These issues are difficult. While I do believe some penalty is warranted, part of this original amount surely was for enforcement costs, staff costs, and in part is for the environmental degradation. In this set of circumstances, a costly effort was made to do some restoration. I cannot believe that the environmental quality of the stream itself and of the protective stream buffers is as effective as it would have been had it not been disturbed. And so there's still some environmental degradation. But I would be sympathetic with a somewhat larger amount of discount off of the original amount of the fine, given the efforts made and the expense borne by the petitioner here.
Would you like to make that in form of an amendment? Commissioner McAdams, you'd like to amend the motion with a dollar amount or
I
percentage
for a
reduction?
substitute motion and see if it gets a second. I move we reduce the penalties in total to $15,000.
Say again, I'm sorry.
I move we reduce the penalties to $15,000.
Mr.
Instead of 36,253.
That's correct.
And with that reduction, Commissioner McAdams, that we have to take in consideration of that reduction in percentage and the breadth of that distance between the 36 and the 15 in relation to what you said earlier about one of the specifics as a reduction. Does that fall under that guideline?
So, Mr. Chairman, that's an excellent question. You're completely within the bounds of what you're allowed to do, because it's not a total reduction or to zero, because you can only do that under certain factors. One thing I would like to point out is that there is a difference between a penalty and enforcement costs. Enforcement costs are required by the state to say, this is how much we put into it to investigate this. And that is separate from the penalty, though we often proceed with them together. So if I may, I just want to make sure I understood from Commissioner McAdams, is it a reduction in penalty? And you'll need to state what grounds it is to 15,000 plus enforcement costs, or are you suggesting that it would be a total of 15,000, which would take into consideration the $1,053 investigation?
In suggesting the number that I did, I was mentally going from what I understood to be a total of 45,000 or thereabouts, discounted 20% to what is now 36,253, and that number instead be $15,000. It is probably the case that is penalty only.
Okay, could I, for clarity, please, Shelton, can you put something up here, please, that's in this material? Because I think this will help at this moment.
Okay.
It's page 11 of 22 on the attachment B.
Okay.
And that will take us to how they arrived at the 45,053.20. If you can you put that up on the screen, please? I just hate this committee and for the people that we should have this readily available for it to be put on the board for questions such as this, because it gives a real good view of the 12,000 2 violations, 10,000 2 violations, and then 44,000 is the civil penalty, and then the enforcement cost is 1,053. So for clarity and getting back to what we have to do by general statute, is that are we into the 44,000 of the civil penalty, or are we into the enforcement cost?
So, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I think your Commissioner McAdams, his question was spot on, and so your points are well made, Mr. Chair. The penalty itself was $44,000, but that's $44,000 plus the investigative costs of $1,053 for a total amount, not a total penalty, but a total amount of $45,053. The staff was recommending an $800 reduction of the penalty, which I believe did not take into account any change, and it would not take into account any change of the investigative costs. So my only question to you was, are you saying is a reduction of the penalty to $15,000, which would be 15,000 penalty, 1,053 for investigative costs, for a grand total of, I actually brushed up on my math just recently so I can do this one, $16,053 would be the total. And that's, so I was just clarifying with you, Commissioner McAdams, whether you were substituting that amount, 15,000 as a total or 15,000 plus investigative.
Now that I have this clarity, I offer a substitute motion that the total be reduced to 16,053. That is 15,000 of penalty and 1,053 of the other fees, costs.
Thank you for your patience with my question.
Thank you for your clarity.
I'm not sure I actually did clear.
Well, just just to make sure we're on the right page, all of us, before we vote on the substitute motion.
No, or does it have a second?
I'll second that. Motion.
We'll have a discussion. Okay, it's been seconded. And thank you, Commissioner Kelvington. So there's a second. Any questions on that substitute motion? My question is, are we in line with the specifics that you brought out earlier when we reduce, as we've done here on this second?
I think the only thing we're missing, Mr. Chairman, is an explanation from Commissioner McAdams. I assume that's because of inadvertence.
Or is that because of his?
Which of the 5 grounds are you saying it was either wrongly applied, or what, or are you reducing because it was inadvertent?
The extensive, if not total, efforts at restoration.
Okay, great. That's what I needed to know.
Okay. Good. Okay, the motion on the substitute motion made and seconded. Discussion. Are we finished with that and we're clear? Okay, all in favor of the substitute motion by Commissioner McAdams, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, majority. And I'll vote yes, and it's on record. Now we go back to the motion on the floor, is that we accept staff's recommendation of, that's the motion.
Substitution of this motion. So in effect.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're at the motion now, the substitute, which was passed. Thank you. Any comments on that? Questions? Concerns? All those in favor of that motion, say aye.
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 All those opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you. So let's get to what we just voted. The total dollar of the remissions.
It's a $30,000 remission, $29,000 remission, taking the $44,000 penalty down to 15.
Gotcha.
And leaving the $1,050
$52.20
intact.
And this,
Just for the record.
Yes, sir. And the specific ground was whether the violator promptly abated continuing environmental damage resulting from the violation and at the cost.
Okay. Okay, it's important here that the requesting party understand what we've just done is just, okay, and staff, we're good. Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on to the next one.
Written decision will be forthcoming. It'll be sent out, a written decision notifying you, sir, of what the decision was, okay?
Thank you. Okay, the others that we have are on the agenda that are not oral. There are 1, 2, 3. There are 5 of these. So we will move right along quickly, I hope. These are not oral. So the next one on the agenda is the request for remission of civil penalty by town of Murphy, Cherokee County. I'll ask the staff to give an overview of that one for committee members. Any material that we have or had sent to us at this time, the state will or staff will give us an overview there of that.
Hi, my name is Bob Sledge. I work with the Water Quality Permitting Section.
Thank you, Bob.
We really hadn't prepared to give a statement. I can try to summarize what we see here that's within the materials that you have. The first case is against the town of Murphy. It's case DD 2019-068. It's for the towns are required to self-report sanitary sewer overflows. They reported an overflow of 2,000 gallons from its collection system, of which 750 gallons reached surface waters, the Hiwassee River. And on March 29th, 2019, the town of Murphy was assessed a civil penalty of $600 plus $114.56 in investigative costs for that sanitary sewer overflow. They requested remission of the penalty. They said that the violation was inadvertent or a result of an accident. I'll let you determine your examination of what they explained with it rather than me try to do it, because I've not been on the site. But they seem to say there's some type of an issue with the sewer line that is required their repair, and they're working towards that. This remission request was considered by Jeff Popart, and there was a decision to not modify that civil penalty, and they have not asked to speak before the committee, but that has brought this matter before you today.
Thank you, Bob. Any questions? Just Commissioner Harris.
A couple of things that I noticed, and maybe you can help me, maybe you can't. They've had 2 other violations where they were assessed. Was this the same pipe or is this part of the same system? Not sure.
I'm sort of hesitant to answer the
fine.
questions, and the fact that part of the reason is because they're not here to give their explanation.
Right.
My look at this, when I see the information that they have supplied on the report, it does look like, just one moment.
I couldn't find it. I saw where they had 2 other assessments and I was just curious. I'll take
My
it that it
assumption
could.
is yes, ma'am, but I do not know.
Okay. And then I guess the only other part I saw, this pipe is 25 years old. I assume it's not encased, otherwise it wouldn't be failing. But they had said it had been inspected 3 months prior, but yet the reason that they're having these failures, that the inverts, it's settling in places, so there's stress on that pipe. And I didn't know if there was any other explanation for that. So while they're inspecting it, yes, it continues to fail just because of the age and the sagging invert. So I didn't know if there was anything else to add. I assume they're working to get this improved, kind of thing, but I just didn't know if there was anything to add there. Because another case we see today, they're securing $2 million in grant to fix their problem. So that's why I was just curious if there was any indication on that. Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm just not aware. I wish I had more to give.
That penalty, if they had driven, they would have used the $714.50. If they had driven. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Harris. What's the pleasure, committee?
I move denial of the request.
Motion's been made by Commissioner McAdams that the request be denied. Second?
Bailey, I second it.
Commissioner Bailey, thank you for seconding. Any questions, further questions? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 All those opposed? Thank you. And the next one is CP Civil Penalty 22-06, Town of Murphy. It's the other one, Cherokee County. This one is for $1,161.96. Bob, since you're up there, you'd like to continue, please?
It's the same petitioner, I believe.
Yep.
Yes, it's the same,
It is.
different time, as you see on the information with the report that has been given to us. This also is for sanitary sewer overflow on July 2nd, 2019. They estimated 3,000 gallons was released from a collection system. 2,000 gallons reached the Hiwassee River. For that, a civil penalty was assessed. In the materials, this is my error. It says that it was a total penalty of $1,161.96. But if you do the math, especially even just looking to the right, that It's actually $1,661.96.
661.
Was
No.
the total penalty that was assessed. They did request remission of the civil penalty. Materials, sorry.
What's the dollar amount that you're recommending then?
What they also talked about the situation, and again, they talked about the installation of the line installed with negative grade. So it makes me think it is at the same location, but it hadn't been fixed between the time of the first and the second ones. But they said were working on construction to correct that. This was reviewed by staff or the agency here, and it was determined to remit $500 of the penalty, which would reduce the total amount to $1,161.96. And we'd request that you would consider that and go no further.
Is this the same incident then?
Not the same incident, but it appears to be at the same location.
One was in February, Mr. Chairman, and the next one is in July.
Yeah, same location. Same problem?
Same problem. In fact, these are three different ones that kind of occurred on July 2nd, July 5th, July 19th. Minimal penalties assessed for each one, but they total $1,250 for the penalties plus the investigative costs.
Okay. What's the pleasure of the committee? Commissioner Derrick.
I move we accept the recommendation of the division and the total penalty, including investigative costs, will be $1,161.96.
Okay. Motion's on the floor. Second. Commissioner
Commissioner
Bailey.
Bailey seconds it.
Second. Any
A
discussion?
clarification is, there is a typo here. It's not 1,161, though that is what is typed. It is 1,661.
Right, but then after that, the staff recommended a $500.
Oh,
Right.
I'm sorry. I am
Yes.
so sorry.
I think.
Yes.
I looked at it too.
So it is 1161, is that right?
Once the
That
staff,
is the recommendation from us following the revision. Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry. I didn't follow that.
Any
My
other,
apologies.
yes, sir. Any other questions, comments, concerns? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you. That's unanimous. The next three are Polk County and town of Trine. Do you want to? I guess, let me ask council, do we group individually or do we group these? Each penalty stands there. Okay. Yeah. Okay, Bob, go ahead.
Sorry.
It is the same place at different time, I guess. I don't.
Yes,
Go
sir.
ahead.
And there's a little bit of, the sequence is a little different, the way that they were addressed with the civil penalties, but all against the town of Tryon for sanitary sewer overflows, self-reported, all from the same location. You can see on your materials, it says it was at an area in Braywick Estates, manhole number 10. You see that on each one of the reports that we have. But the first case, DV 2021-0151, it was for a sanitary sewer overflow that occurred on March 4th, 2021. The town was assessed a civil penalty of $2,000 plus $119.92 in investigative costs. The town did request remission of the penalty, and they checked in the remission factors that the payment of the penalty was going to keep them from being able to complete further repairs of the system. That information was discussed at an enforcement conference, and with the information provided by the regional office, our agency made the decision to reduce the penalty by 50% down to $1,119.96. $1,000,000.92. And that's the amount that we asked the committee to consider today.
Pleasure, committee.
A question. So I noticed that, so the town of, Murphy, when they had an overflow, it was like $600 was the penalty the first time, and their amounts were lower for the penalty than the town of Tryon with initially $2,000. Can you explain why that there's a difference there?
I didn't make the assessment. It should be in the assessment factor, some explanation of how they came about the penalty. One thing I would note just from my observation here is the volumes were higher. Volumes to the surface waters were higher. And probably the first went to the Hiwassee River, which might have provided some dilution for raw sewage to find there. This went to either in one case to Little Creek or a unnamed tributary of Little Creek. So there's a lot more opportunity for damage to occur in this situation. Again, I think the volume would probably be the biggest issue, but I'm probably speaking out of school.
That's a good question, Commissioner Harris.
Just a couple of comments. And I know we're doing one at a time,
Yes, ma'am.
but I have to think a little bit on the three, because if all of them were issued a penalty, we had 7 penalties prior. So it's 7 penalties for each one, correct? So if they, assessed before, I guess it'll come out to 9 if they get penalized on each one. Not saying they will, but I did read that they had secured $2 million in a grant to address their issues. And so that was just something I wanted to make sure everybody was aware of, that. They're trying to fix this one. It sounds like they got a system that's falling apart up there. So that's just a comment I'm going to make on that.
So just, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Thank you, Commissioner Harris. That's a good point. That's a good thought. Yes.
Just to remind the committee that you have to take them all at a time.
Yep.
And the only factor that considers previous assessments is in fact one in the assessment itself, because there was an assessment. So they haven't, so the word you used earlier were, if they do get assessed, well, they have been assessed, right? So that's what you're considering, not future actions, but the actions as documented in front of them. Each of them that have been assessed each of these times. Each of these are independent considerations, but you take into consideration past violations, right? In deciding whether to, for both compliance purposes and in the case you want to try to remit it. And then you look at those 8 factors that the secretary assesses individually each time. So that they're the same town, they're different incidences. So you have to just look at them one at a time.
If I could just interject, I think maybe I know where you're going with previous. If you have a previous event or a discharge, same location, same problem, is it previous enough? Is it the same problem, but then you're counting against that previous incident for that problem, and then if the same problem exists 3 months later and they're trying to fix it at the same place, it's just a different time, the same model, everything is worked up, does it count 2 flags against them for that third assessment when it comes to penalty enforcement? It's the same incident. So when you consider penalties, the same problem, is it habitual? Is it constant fouling on purpose? Or do you consider it's the system that needs to be fixed, and staff comes in and recommends a penalty, a civil penalty, and assess this? Should it be lower? Or should it be more? Jeff, help me on that one.
Compliance history means you go up.
Yeah.
So for each one.
Just to clarify, to make Philip happy, every case is considered independently, and the 8 factors are considered independently for each situation. But we do have guidance that we compare statewide issues for sanitary sewer overflow specifically that says volumes of certain size, water body that it's going into, typical penalties are in this range for that sort of overflow. So from that, that's why you might see a difference in penalty, including the other factors of previous enforcement history, but there's other factors beyond that. Water body and volume being the most specific and similar cause.
Gotcha. Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Bailey.
So thank you for explaining to us that there is some consistency across the state. Well, I'm not asking, I'm just commenting that was helpful to hear about the consistency across the state, that you're looking at it that way. And then I guess the other part is, if a town isn't assessed, then sometimes they're not motivated to go ahead and get the grant or get the financial assistance they need to take care of this problem. And actually, I feel like the staff had recommended a 50% reduction of something we've been told is a consistent sort of system of penalties. So I would move to uphold the staff's recommendation to reduce it by 50%, plus those investigative costs. So then that makes the penalty $1,000, and then the investigative costs are $119.92.
Okay, a motion on the floor, to accept the staff's recommendation with a 50% reduction.
Yes.
Okay, and do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Moss. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed? Thank you. Motion carried. We'll get to the next.
The second case against the town of Tryon is case DV 2021-052. This one, you note on the summary, is actually the event occurred prior to the first one that you just considered.
Okay.
Just 2 days prior, same location, 7,000 gallons from the collection system. They believe that total volume reached surface waters. The civil penalty was assessed on April 27th, 2021, $2,000 plus $119.92 in investigative costs. These cases went out to them about the same time, and you have to see the common remission requests with the same issues brought up by the town. Those were considered, and similar to what you saw in the first one, 50% reduction in the penalty was granted when the agency did its initial remission review.
What's the pleasure of the committee? Would you like to?
I'll make a motion. If there's no further comments, I'll make a motion to support the staff's recommendation again of the reduction
Okay.
of 50%, plus the investigative costs of $119.92, for a total of $1,119.92.
Motion's been made that we accept the staff's recommendation. That 50% reduction, totaling $1,119.92. We have a second. Commissioner Harris, thank you. Any other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed? Thank you. Last one. Thank you, Bob.
The third case for the town of Tryon is case DV 2021-092. It was for a sanitary sewer overflow. Again, Brave Estates, manhole number 10. On March 18th, 2021, 7,000 gallons from the collection system. They estimate that total volume reached surface waters. Similar volumes, the same penalty, $2,000 civil penalty plus $119.92 in investigative costs were assessed on July 6th. They requested remission. Same information was submitted. As we heard in the last one, at the same enforcement conference, our staff looked over the case and agreed to a 50% reduction of this penalty also.
Pleasure of the committee.
I'll make another comment on that is I think we need to point out too that they did comply with their permit, which they self-reported. I think that's always excellent that somebody picked up the phone or however the reporting is done these days. They reported the violation on all these instances. So that's a good faith effort. And so once again, I'm going to move to accept the staff's decision on remitting 50% of the penalty itself so that the total then becomes $1,119.92.
Okay, motion's on the floor then that the reduction of 50% totaling $1,119.92. Is there a second? Thank you, Commissioner Harris. It's been seconded. Any other comments on this? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you. Thank you for standing in too, Bob. Appreciate that. That concludes all of what's on the agenda. Are there any comments from committee members?
I just have one.
Commissioner Bailey,
It's been
yes.
difficult reviewing these because at least even at home and down here, you'll pull up a document and then it blanks out for a while. And then like you, I wanted to print off a page or two, which would help me follow along, and I couldn't print anything. That's just been difficult.
Well, I agree with that, and that's a note well taken. So I would want that to be on the record, going to staff and IT or whoever is doing this, that it becomes really for us committee members at home. It's easier to take paper around with us when we go to our other jobs and all. We can just note of study that we can take 15 or 20 minutes without a computer and make notes from printed material, even though we don't get reimbursed for printing at home. But we do the ink and the paper, and it's quite difficult to build information from what we've got. Okay?
One comment, I think we could help with indexing. I think one of the problems is you end up with because we don't want to put that many links, Lois doesn't want to put that many links on the website, you end up with 300, I think this was 313 pages for the Alderman. Maybe we could put an index in the front that said the finding decision is here, the remissions is here. So to some extent, you could not necessarily when you did want to print, or you'd be able to find the documents quickly, because I know even staff struggle to find, page 91. We could try to do a little indexing to make that easier, but without Lois having to.
Well, it will, and I appreciate that. Thank you for all the help that you can give us. Yeah. You had.
I was just going to say, I finally figured out why I couldn't find the same document I had seen before. It's because but I'm very fortunate to have an assistant who was kind enough to download everything from the website in a PDF, and boy, that makes it much easier.
Yeah, so what happens, this approach added at least 4 more clicks and additional waiting time to my system when I want to download something, because for the majority of today, I did not get entry into the internet. I finally got it about 10 minutes left in my Water Quality Committee meeting. So I download, and in order to do that, you have to go into the link, you have to download, you have to save, then you have to go back into what you've downloaded, which is consuming space on my laptop.
Yep, true.
Then you have to print.
I couldn't even download.
Yeah,
So I mean, I was really out.
I really wish they would ask our opinion before they start doing it, because I'm not sure they're aware of what is involved for us to do this.
Lois is back there ready to turn in her hymnals to whatever page you want, because she's going to sing that hymn.
But we as a remissions group have a very important task before us for the state to represent the people and these remissions, penalties, and dollars. So we want to study it at the best we can. But I would like to close, but before I do that, I wanted to touch on something that Commissioner Harris mentioned a while ago about grants, dollars for these municipalities. The governor just released, in fact, he just got it yesterday, the state seeks public comments on proposed plan to administer American Rescue Plan Act's funding for stormwater projects. Now, that's stormwater, and now we're talking about wastewater today, but this is not just the wastewater, stormwater investments, drinking water, potable water, but these are very important comment times for these to get your projects in. And when these municipalities, I guess they'll get a letter from us that, or from DEQ, that this has happened today. And it would be nice if somehow we could enhance the importance of doing what this administration is wanting to get the word out for this rescue plan, these fundings for these municipalities. And if we can have a comment section, please know that this is going on. So add to the reports that we're sending, add to this information so these municipalities can pick up on this and hopefully fast track getting their municipalities, especially small rural towns. Yep. Thank you. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you so much for coming. Be safe.
Well, you were not the same. Come on. Yeah, they told me. Congratulations.